My new job requires me to work from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., but every midnight my task is to hide in a special room. Quite the odd regulation, right? Welcome to everybody. You can call me Cole. Given its length and difficulty of pronunciation, it is a far shorter form of my actual name. I will only refer to the real company you are reading as such to avoid any problems with that institution. Load shedding destroys the nation I dwell in around the start of 22 to just now. The power goes down twice or 3 times at different times and places, shown by an app often every day for 1 hour. Since green energy and electric generators are yet neither popular nor reasonably priced, most typically these disruptions in the electricity supply occur at night to prevent upsetting enterprises' activities during the day. Consequently, crimes like stealing increased during the night and surged the demand for security, thereby generating employment possibilities. After a protracted time of search and suffering, on September 7, 2023, I at last came across a job paying a very reasonable compensation to help my family of 4 survive. The employment. Alone and under darkness, a security guard assigned to protect an inside storage facility was in an apparently typical posture. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. define my work days and hours. The main worry is about written in my contract. One weird and enigmatic rule circling around a specific time and also a specific area is: be in the black room from 12 until 12:59 a.m. Do not interact with anyone or leave the black chamber under any conditions before 01 a.m. Let to fall asleep in the black room between 12 and 12:59 a.m. That time period basically acts as my pause, but for some unidentified reason I had to spend it in the black room. That gloomy location gets its name from its little room with steel door and whole interior, painted in the darkest black I have ever seen, so black that seemed to absorb and dim any source of light. Equipped with a black chair, a black clock, a metallic bucket coated in black and set on top of a black cupboard, and even a black couch. The small location is also the control room from which I can view the entire facility. I started working the very following day. For various unidentified reasons, I only got my black outfit on the 13th. I followed the guidelines for the first night and saw nothing particularly unusual till I noticed something odd on the monitors, active all midnight. One after the other, a strange phenomena influencing the cameras turn by turn resulted in extreme distortion affecting the matching displays in the control room. Something I could not identify owing to the anomaly went about freely in the entire building, then stopped exactly in front of the black door at 12:58 a.m. and vanished at 01 a.m. Additionally, returning to normal at precisely 01 a.m. was the camera facing the black room. When I told my company about the incident, he totally disregarded it and only advised me to obey the policies. About what should I be complaining about? I really need this job, but also when I consider police officers, mortuary assistants, miners, and graveyard keepers, and the things they may be presented with, I come to the conclusion that a job is a job, with good and bad aspects. Thus, I have to be a brave man. Driven by either curiosity or anxiety, yesterday on the 15th clock in at 7 p.m. and intended to see the thing with my naked sight by peeping under the black door any time it would pass the black chamber. Disappointingly, around 11 p.m., I discovered that the steel door has absolutely no room whatsoever through which I could see anything. So ready for what was about to happen, I settled for simply observing the displays. Unlike last night, this night the distortion was accompanied by outside the room noises, sounds of the storage unit doors rattling along the path of the invisible and unknown thing. The object passed in front of the black room at 12:17 a.m. shook too, which made me stand up terrified. As I started to sweat, my heart pounding, I tried to call the police on both my phone and on the radio. Both have malfunctioning screens that flashing. I had to deal with this alone. The intruder passed once more in front of the black chamber at 12:34 a.m., and that time the door shook so strongly I thought it was about to come off the frame. Trembling in terror, I retreated till I struck the cabinet behind me. Sadly, the metallic bucket dropped from it and created the relevant and suitable loud sound that attracted the intruder's attention. Did I just engage in interaction? Using the word's definition, I did not. My panic drove an instinctive occurrence, but the item stopped moving. Looking at the monitors, I confirmed that the entity stood exactly there on the other side of the entry, since the camera in front of the black room was still influenced by the creature with matching screen flickering and the door was still trembling. I stayed still and quiet, sweating and breathing fast until the door's tremor and the monitor distortions ended at the same moment. Looking at the clock, it was 01:00 a.m. This time I turned in what I would consider to be a clean report instead of grumbling to my company. Before returning there, I intend to pack a few practical items so that I may work safely. Guys, I work 2 days running before a break. You know my timetable. I intend to let you all know about the occurrences of the 2 last evenings on every day off. But let me savor the company of my wife and children for the rest of this lovely Saturday and tomorrow Sunday. This is the reason I have to do this job. I will be checking in at 7 p.m. Monday the 18th and Tuesday the 19th. The app states that load shedding would take place in the vicinity of my job on Wednesday, the 20th, from 12:00 a.m. to 01:00 a.m. That hour I shall spend in the black room. As I advised in my last post, last Sunday I got ready for the next 2 shifts. Though I'm not really sure what I'm up against, I reasoned that there were certain practical items I could buy to place myself in some sort of advantage. After a brief detour by the store and spent the most money I could for that purpose, I returned home with a machete, a nail gun for lack of something better like a revolver, and some fancy flashlights known to be resistant to electromagnetic disturbance. When I got home with the goods, my wife, who wasn't sure how great I had characterized my new workplace, asked me once again some specifics about my new employment. Once more, I lied to her to protect the peace instead of digging up past issues of conflict. More about the matters in next entries. Arriving at work on Monday at around 6:33 p.m., I quickly got ready for the shift. I can tell you, of course, nothing in that place seems remarkable. Whatever the hour, everything seems natural and quite not out of line. Just that midnight is the dark stain in what I imagined to be a clear scene. Except for the machete, I brought the things to the black room 5 minutes before the dreadful time and stored them in the cabinet. I sat with the machete in front of the monitors, waiting for the horror show to start. For some reason, I thought it more practical than the conventional security guard baton. The oddity started as usual at the main entrance at 12:00 a.m. when the camera in that location started to malfunction. It prowled stealthily, not disturbing any door, and passed in front of the black door at 12:17 a.m., exactly as on the first night. Obviously, the distortion prevented me from seeing anything on the monitor, which naturally piqued my interest. Although I know nothing about you, I am not the kind of person who follow blindly in line with a vague rule. Imagine, for instance, renting a house and learning that a particular door had to never be opened, without even hinting at the motive? Should human remains be present there, what then? I devised a daring scheme to see this enigmatic midnight being. On the monitors, I observed its motions, which to me at first appeared to be consistent and unchanged as long as no disturbance arises. The contract never referenced the black room door either. One can occupy a room without locking the door. I can be in the room even leaving the door wide open. Using my logic, I stood at the door at 12:33 a.m. and slightly opened it, just enough to have a fair perspective of the corridor. I watched the object entering the black chamber via the monitors and prepared to view it with my unaided eyes. As if in those beautifully lit hallways, someone was walking across with a flame torch. Something radiating a warm yellow glow was approaching. I felt my pulse quickening before I could see the person carrying the light, or its actual source, or whatever it truly was. Something just felt off, and my skin became covered in hair like though I were a scared cat. I fast locked the door and couldn't let myself know what that object was. It stood exactly on the other side of the door once more, not moving from there till 01:00 a.m., then vanished. A few minutes later, I emerged from a totally typical surroundings, but carried my machete just in case. Tuesday was the next night with the planned load shedding. I once more sat in front of the monitors until the lights went off, so enveloping me in total darkness at precisely 12:00 a.m. I reasoned at the time that a nap would be quite pleasant, but I soon discovered the room lacked even a mattress. Setting an alert for 01:00 a.m., I just placed the chair against the wall, sat with my legs and arms crossed, closed my eyes, trying to go asleep as quickly as I could. A few minutes later, I could hear footsteps in the corridor. Without the monitors then off due to the load shedding, I could not determine the exact location of the object and could not risk opening the door in that absolute darkness. I listened carefully till I got up, approaching the door. When I turned on one of the flashlight I had stashed in the cupboard, the light fluttered. Still, I could see 12:17 a.m. on the clock as I went back to the door. Up till I could no longer hear them, I heard the quick footfall growing farther and further. They returned at 12:22 a.m., but this time it sounded as though at least 4 people were briskly walking, rather than only one. "That was what on earth?" I murmured. They returned in the black room corridor at 12:38 a.m., then sounded as if a complete platoon of troops running before the door. The footfall were so weighty that the door shook until they just stopped, sending the already dark space into a menacing calm. The object outside began to knock on the door out of nowhere as the doorknob twisted. It was trying to open. I started to crawl backwards in panic, watching the door being pressed by the invader across the flickering of the flashlight. I longed to wield my machete, but could not even remember where I had left it. Once more, everything froze, and the giggle of a woman abruptly broke the brief and deep silence, almost piercing my ears. Not a friendly laugh, more like a "I'll get you one day" kind of giggle. Who was that? Fearful, I stayed fixed on the door till the alarm on my phone startled me even more when 01:00 a.m. sounded and the electricity returned on. I could not have walked outside before sunrise. Thinking much about my circumstances and life, I stayed in the black chamber until the end of my shift. I get paid weekly, hence last week I could at least obtain half of the salary. I won't lie. That piece of the cake appeared weighty and wiped out a good portion of my wife's and my financial worries. When I returned home early today, my wife and the children were all giddy about some items we may get for the house and ourselves. I could never take away from them that type of delight. I just have to keep on. But I have to have a major talk with someone before coming back to work tomorrow, Thursday. Following my supervisor's directions on Thursday, September 21st, 2023, I arrived at work at 5 p.m., making sure I was early enough to maximize the duration of our meeting. He warned me right from the start that we only had 20 minutes, and he sadly only freed himself at 6 o'clock. Our interaction resembled this. "Your problem, Cole, what is it? Like, severely? Having a work and supporting your family makes you happy, right?" He inquired. "At the price of my sanity? The life I lead. Are you not man enough to manage this employment? Do you believe everyone around has it simple? Alternatively, that there is only you under pressure? "Sir, what is this thing trying to grab me? What is that midnight phenomenon all about?" Desperate, I requested only to get the least expected response. "I'm not sure," my manager responded. "What?" "I'm sorry, even I, your supervisor, definitely know nothing. Perhaps if you could contact the CEO, you ought to question her, though I'm not sure whether she responds to mailings. But do you suppose all those people out there might have the solution?" "Where? What folks? You think I missed your posts online?" he questioned, confusing me. "Yeah, right. Now glance at me with your wide eyes. I noticed them. Do you suppose those folks would respond to your questions? Thus, it is a trend nowadays. The instant an employee is dissatisfied, the whole scenario turns out to be sub." He raised questions. "I'm really sorry, sir. I just wanted to drop the trash. Our institution does not have any policy prohibiting such actions. Even if it's a dog, you can even keep on if that helps you deal. Just avoid mentioning the company or anyone engaged in the business. Okay? And don't cheat as last time either. Whether it means anything to you, everything is back to normal after midnight. You are expected to be patrolling, not chilling the whole night in the black room. Okay? Understood, sir. I always advised you to just do as directed by the policies. You all are safe in that room. What is difficult about it?" "Sir, this is crazy. I mean, this isn't usual, and also..." "What happened to the last man?" I inquired. "You find him, looking at him. Look, this is exactly what I advised, a sort of training for you. This first month entirely. However, you might want to think about leaving if you believe you cannot manage this job." Standing up to leave himself, he said, "And you know there's no career for you any place in the world if you can't manage pressure. Work has good and terrible days. That is the reality. Think not of remote workers or influencers as having things easy. Nobody does, particularly here at this company. Look about you and more intently. Even me, each of us has guidelines to follow. One among them is not gonna be here at 6:30 p.m. Only you should be here right now," he added, then turned to leave. "Thank you very much, sir," I answered just now. "Also, here's some advice for a stubborn kind like yours. Should you find yourself caught, make sure your complete uniform is on, close your eyes, and refrain from moving or speaking," he confessed. Or else. Before he opened the door, I asked. He just raised his shirt to expose the most startling scar I have ever seen on a belly. The stitches made it look like a crocodile's closed mouth. Much worse. Just be as drivers would be. They produce mishaps, perish, and even kill as well in the course of non-rule following. Cole, obey the guidelines. You could need further advice. I will call you tonight. Grinning, he replied, then turned to go. The change on Thursday was almost uneventful. I was in the black chamber just waiting for the thing to show me the fresh moves it had in store at midnight. It showed up at the door at 12 a.m. as usual, but stayed there only. It merely stood there, influencing the camera at the building's entryway. It did not wander about. Since it was far, I could even use my phone and the radio as it wouldn't impact anything from that distance. My wife contacted me. Usually, I sing our own prepared lullaby for my children, so my wife thought our 5-year-old young boy needed me to sing for him as he was having trouble sleeping. We then had a brief conversation, but my wife pushed on my employment since she realized that attitude mattered and asked whether I wanted to quit. She knows me well, and I used to quit my former employment right away without considering the repercussions when I was bored. Again, we almost battled about it since she believes I am about to do it and would be disappointing my family. We ended the call with a more upbeat note after over an hour of reassuring her. By then it was 01:08 a.m., and naturally the entity had finished its shift. It was time then to start my again. I could not have, however, prepared me for what Friday held. Everything once more began quietly until midnight. Unlike yesterday, at 12 a.m., the thing was nowhere to be seen, not a distortion on one camera. The coast appeared to be clear. 30 minutes later, I decided to check my phone and discovered I had left it in the toilet just across from the black chamber. Whatever my boss had to say, I wanted to hear it, as I knew he knew more than he was ready to share, and I would not miss that call. As my supervisor pointed out, there are good and bad days at work. Hence, should the entity decide to take a day off, I might find tranquility for once. I decided to grab the chance to find my phone. Equipped with my machete, I gently unlocked the door and gasped at the view I came upon. I came onto the windowless living room of a very old house instead of the corridor, surely adorned by an elderly woman from the 50s, an old wooden house. A few meters away, gently set on a little wooden table, my phone made a strange static sound before I could hear my voice from it, performing the same lullaby I sing for my children, to my great perplexity. I then gently looked at the monitors and am quite appreciative of you doing this, since the creature was flying towards the black room at a speed I did not realize it had, rapidly twisting one after the other. I locked and closed the door hard. Not even 10 seconds later, I heard it approaching and roaring. Then it started to pound on the door. The worst was not that creature trying to force the door open. It was its growls, moving from that of a beast to that of a lady, to that of a youngster, to that of a man, and other things I cannot even define. Eventually, I slumped on the floor, my hands protecting my ears since its wrath shouts were deafening. Everything halted only at 010 a.m., although I'm not sure whether I missed the call from my supervisor. Finally, we did not get to chat. After my work, I went home prepared to ignore my wife and quit. I was mistaken also, as I could at least get some rest and remove my mind from what I just gone through. First to greet me as soon as I entered was my kid. All my wife could tell me was that the thrill derived from a dream he experienced last night. When I asked him about it, he detailed the dream, that the entire family was on a deserted island, dressed like pirates, which he truly enjoys. While also, then, a voice informed him that fruits, water, and a treasure were buried somewhere, and that the family's only means of access to those pleasant things was for me to simply leave the dark room. When I left my house on Monday at about 6:08 p.m., I noticed a man wearing a black motorcycle helmet prowling around. When asked about his behavior, he simply informed me he was looking for a specific location, but he might be in the wrong place and he did not remove his helmet. Ignoring me as he returned, he refused to let me assist him going forward, then climbed on his motorcycle and sped off. Until I got to work at 6:37 p.m., commuting never seemed so miserable as I continued looking on my phone for employment offers. Indeed, one of the few advantages of this work is that I live not too far from the office. When I arrived at the entryway, I found my counterpart for the day shift. Before the discussion turned to more weighty issues, we greeted one another and spoke a few words on daily life. Apart from one regarding the black room, my colleague's outfit is completely red, and he follows several guidelines that appear reasonable. Unlike me, he is not allowed to visit that room or even view its inside. That alone made the thought of leaving that circus consoling. I could not run away from my discomfort during the shift, and before midnight I chose another way to handle it. At 11:55 p.m. I left the building and locked the door behind me. That creature could haunt the structure, but not the entire region for definite sure. Sure that I would see this phenomenon with my own eyes and in complete safety, I stood at the entry in front of the glass sliding doors. I was perplexed when, at 12:15 a.m., nothing showed at the entry as it should. Still, the radio emitted a familiar static sound that caught my attention and revealed its screen flickering, attesting to the presence of the thing. 10 minutes later, at the windows, I noticed thick gray smoke rising from many sections of the building. I wanted to find aid at first, since I assumed the object had started a fire, but I soon became fascinated by something. Feeling the entire structure to the extent I could not see anything inside, the smoke seemed alive and moved in a somewhat strange manner. I hope I could record that on film, but as you know, this is affecting my phone also when nearby. Plus, I have to be careful not to compromise the company. I do not know if this is the actual form of that thing. The spectacle ran all through midnight, and the smoke disappeared as soon as it turned 1 in morning. Hoping I had discovered a hack to save my sanity, I walked carefully inside to start my shift. 5 minutes were enough to find out what the creature accomplished while I was out. Completely broken by the sight of all the storage units' doors ripped apart, with some of the stored contents scattered on the floor, my supervisor desperately tried to contact me on the radio at that instant, but I could not even reply. "I'm really sorry about what happened, sir." On Tuesday, the next afternoon, I apologized for the umpteenth time. "You left the room not staying in it. Look right now." The reply came from my boss. "This week you won't get paid for. Are we in agreement on that?" He continued as he and other senior authorities oversaw emergency door replacements to cover the enormous error and institution brand damage. I stayed there all day, noting all I could from where I sat. Everything and everyone looked to be set like clock or computer programs, as if all those folks, just like me, merely sought to get through the day before bolting out of there. I could not find any real smile or any real laughter. Most likely, everyone was doing as advised. Regarding my family, it certainly took a lot to convince my wife that everything was good. But at least I still had the employment and was ready to begin a new shift. Not even 1 month and already so many events. My heart stayed somewhat heavy, and even more that Tuesday night when I sat in the black chamber at 11:47 p.m. I was angry and felt imprisoned. I was notified via the load-shedding app about an expected problem on a producing plant at 11:50 p.m., which compelled the energy provider to initiate an emergency suspension of service set to commence in 10 minutes at midnight. Empty and angry, I simply answered the news by shutting the black room's door. The lights turned out at 12:20 a.m., and I thought the thing arrived triumphant at the door. My phone rang at 12:15 a.m., and I realized my wife was calling. Since I did not even come back home that day, I truly believed that my son had problems sleeping once more, but the call served far less than intended. Her terror caused us to go back and forth. I attempted to comprehend her, but from what I could gather, she was hiding somewhere in the house with the children, waiting for the police she had previously contacted, since a man wearing a black motorcycle helmet had burst into our house. When they all yelled in panic and the phone stopped, my heart dropped since it meant the man had most likely discovered them. The screen was flickering when I tried to call back, so I looked at the clock and saw 12:17 a.m., and the creature was walking by the black chamber. After a few minutes, the thing was far enough for my phone to go back to normal. I called my wife back and it went straight to voicemail. I tried to phone the police, but my phone and the radio went all of a sudden, leaving me without any other choices. This related to my family. Whether the supervisor finds this post or about the views of individuals who believe I am stubborn, negligent, or plain stupid, it makes no difference to me. One of the fancy spotlights, my nail gun, grabbed, and I inhaled deeply before exciting the black chamber. I just have to get outside from the rear entrance, find some assistance, perhaps even using one of the corporate cars at the parking, if at all possible. Continuously glancing behind and in front of me, I rushed in the dark hallways. After all, that was the chance for that creature to at last make a winning action. Things appeared a little too quiet. I headed over the sea of darkness, but sadly did not arrive at the scheduled point. I was at the rear entrance and could not make any mistakes. Instead of seeing the door, a wall immediately reflected my shadow as a warm yellow light drew behind me. Once more, that sensation took control. Something truly wrong, something that ought not to be there and shouldn't be happening. Cold crept into my spine while my hair stood. My eyes went blurry and I started to shake wildly. I recalled then the words of my supervisor. If you find yourself trapped, just make sure your full uniform on, close your eyes, and don't make a single movement or sound. Turning off the lamp, I saw I had the complete uniform on, up to the cap and the gloves. Before aligning my back against the wall, I tightly grasped the nail gun and the flashlight. To hide from seeing that thing I also so sorely needed to see and comprehend, I closed my eyes. Probably enjoying the occasion, the thing sauntered toward me. Though I couldn't hear no footfall, I heard the metallic sounds of an ancient kerosene lantern. The darkness of my closed eyelids changed to crimson as the lamp moved from side to side as though the entity was looking at me, inches away from my face. I was breathing quietly enough, but fast, though the memory of my family together with that of my boss fastened me against the wall. I wanted to cry so horribly, shout so loud, run so swiftly. Open your eyes, it murmurs, but I stayed quiet and unmoving. It then drove the horror to unprecedented heights. Then many hands fell on my body, while the demon carried on mental agony. Still, although on the brink of bursting, I kept my tears and urines under control. A few of the hands seemed to come out of the wall from behind me. Other hands wounded me as they explored my flesh as the thing sought a reaction from me and continued on speaking, requesting me to open my eyes. They had sharp nails or maybe claws. I underwent the ordeal till the creature disappeared and a light nearly blinded me. The power had come back around 1:04 a.m. I moved forward and collapsed to knees, panting with relief. Recalling my family, I turned around to see the rear entry back open and heard my phone ringing. This was my wife. Unlike her calm demeanor, I answered the phone in terror as she said she had neither contacted the police nor me previously. She simply phoned back because she missed my call 30 minutes earlier and there had never been a male invading our house. I shut up the call, looked around, saw the minor cuts on my body, and wondered what on earth I had just gotten myself into after not finding any answer to the perplexing disclosures. The time had at last come last Wednesday. Though this is unpleasant and painful, this cannot continue. Since my wife is not as open-minded as you folks, there was no way to explain everything to her. Hence, I only told her that I was preparing to quit once more. We battled for hours as I could not give her the truth about anything, not even my wounds. But on the other hand, it was most definitely better for my family not to know more about that profession, and particularly that item. Things at home are fast changing. All of my children now dream of the voice, and I am being asked to leave the dark room after contracting an unusual illness that attacks their lungs. Like that, I was about to give up in the thick of the storm and there was an extreme need for money. Fortunately, my supervisor called me the following day for us to have another discussion, most definitely regarding the events on Monday and Tuesday. That was the best chance to stop this nightmare, but his reaction to my readiness to step down immediately broke me. Did we have an agreement? You cannot, however, do that. You signed a contract, hence you cannot leave right now, said he. After my protest, he showed me the part binding me to that company for the next 2 months before I could discuss resignation and vacation. He also got my copy of the contract I am quite sure to have read completely before signing. I persisted, thinking I was being duped, but he dismissed it, claiming the corporation intended to thank me with a 30% rise instead of even calling me for such a trouble. I startled myself. This was not happening following my blunder, and made absolutely no sense. I came across the man with the black motorbike helmet, apparently waiting for someone when leaving the premises. When I tried to ask him whether he was lost once more, he answered with a query on how I liked working for my new company. Based on what I knew of our unpleasant conversation, the guy, who had no understanding what that work involved, is a prior applicant who objected to me for landing the job. He said I did not even qualify for such a job, which for me is really amusing. Now that I know about the job, I actually agree with him even though he does not know what he is talking about, and I know that you people agree with him too, since I cannot stop breaking the rules. Ah, humanity. From the outside looking in, everything seems so simple until you take the position of the person you are yelling at. Look at them passionately screaming at athletes during sport events, or at anyone else in a situation they are not directly engaged in. Still, some of you clearly want to be of service. Using your logic and recommendations, I acquired some extra survival tools to last midnight. Among them, Bluetooth-canceling noise earphones, since we know the creature enjoys to knock on the door for attention, and I appreciate music. To be honest, on Thursday I was not ready to fall for the manipulations of that monster. The evening went nicely until midnight, naturally. Cozy on the couch and beneath the blanket with my earplugs, I watched the thing wander the building from 12:04 a.m. to 12:34 a.m., influencing the cameras as usual until it halted at the black room door. Glancing at the door, I realized it was shaking. Investigating, I took out my earplugs to hear the thing growling on the door. Yes, certainly, suit yourself. Before returning the earbuds, I considered, but after a few minutes, I heard static instead of the distorted music and then my own voice. Imbecile, idiot, idiotic, moron. That ends up in such a location is only the fool of your kind. I am still here since fools like you inspire me. Not even do you know the reason you find yourself in that chamber. Do you consider yourself safe inside? I will pay you back for all the suffering you are causing me. You will know nothing peace until I crush your progeny, your love, and everything you know. First, I will begin with... I took off the earbuds at that time and heard it still using my own voice continue its hate-filled rant behind the door. Your eldest, and you will fall last. I will eat your fear, hopelessness, blood until you ask me to. I tightened my jaws and rested my hands on my ears to mute the nasty comments. That thing even discussed, what was it? Until everything ceased at 01 a.m., I stayed cooped on the couch trying to silence the noise with my gloved hands. I did not reply. I did not engage and indeed survived that period. Something I truly hope you would be delighted with. I stayed in the room and respected the policies. I have not been dumb for once. Please do not hesitate to congrats me. Friday I returned with noise-canceling headphones for sleep. Sure, the thing would not be able to communicate with those on. I wasn't ready for what lay ahead. Once more, at midnight, I was on the couch, under the blanket with my earbuds and a flashlight. But after turning everything off, the light, the monitors, the radio, and my phone, I even packed some sleeping medications, but I refrained from using these, a fact I think helped me to preserve my life. I slept in the black chamber for the first time, maybe 20 minutes before I started to cough without control. I could not even stop coughing at one point, which finally woke me up to see a horrible scene. I first smelled strongly of smoke and could not see anything in the dark. After turning on my flashlight, I still couldn't see nothing save the dark gray smoke cloud encircling me, thus aggravating my eyes. I still have no notion about the degree of the entity's powers, hence I dreaded having been teleported out of the black room. I assumed it was right next to me since I heard it laughing so near. Was it a fire? Was that the smoke of the thing I saw from outside the structure that time? I wondered till I came upon something metallic and rattling. That was the door of the black room. While the creature was still outside, I was still inside, and it had found a means of injuring me. Not even able to tell what hour it was, I coughed again, sure I would die suffocating in that chamber. Defaced, I wound up on the ground and heard the creature celebrating. "You are ignorant of what I am capable of, nasty bastard. You were the reason everything grew worse. You'll pay. I'll make sure you pay. I'll show you stuff Kevin never saw me do." Speaking like numerous persons synced and using the same phrases, it said, then laughed wildly. "For the reasons you know, I altered his name to Kevin, but keep in mind the creature had just mentioned my supervisor." All at once then, everything stopped. The smoke had gone, but I still couldn't breathe normally. Still on the floor, my flashlight on, I glanced at the clock and noted 01 a.m. I still ponder about those evenings and the entity's statements even today, without knowing why it resues me so much for things I clearly know of. As I suspected, my boss was keeping a lot of secrets from me. Furthermore, if the creature can sneak gas or smoke into the black room, then it implies that even there I am no more safe, as indicated. I have no idea what it can do. Still, I believe my supervisor and I should get together once again. Let me only hope I will still be alive tomorrow Monday to do so. Like my kids, I have been coughing constantly over the weekend, but my disease of the lungs had a terrible turn. Unlike my kids, sometimes I cough and sadly my mouth fills with blood. The worst is now under progress. Still, what I saw shakes me. My only goals were to work, be active, pay my bills, and take care of my family. Was that overly ambitious to ask? Why did I have to deal with that being bursting with resentment and grudge? Even though my children and I show symptoms of a severe lung infection, after seeing a doctor on Saturday, we have been found in normal health conditions. We so get treatment and drugs in line with that unusual and contradictory observation. In each of them encountering the so-called voice, who lately taught them an odd and unpleasant song about the dark chamber, the kids filled with delight and enthusiasm over their unusual and group dreams despite the illness. Last time I told you, my wife is not an open-minded person like you folks. Today, even she is beginning to get somewhat uneasy about the unusual event occurring to the children. When Monday at last arrived, I eagerly awaited meeting my supervisor. Still shocked by its content, which I know was not the same when I first read and signed my contract, I examined it one more umpteen times before attending the appointment. I arrived at work already at 5 p.m., waiting patiently for my supervisor to schedule time for me. He surprised me by turning up wearing 3 gas masks, suggesting that he still reads my postings and shows worries about the circumstances. He said he was sorry. He also referred to it by name, not knowing the creature could ignore the black room's security, the kind of name that I would prefer not to disclose with you for your own benefit, one which cannot be borne by a person. Clearly reluctant to disclose more and unable to offer better answers, he offered me a sleep mask and mentioned his advice on closing my eyes and not moving if imprisoned. To be really honest, I still find it difficult to comprehend how the thing could be helpful. And then arrived the night. Midnight or not, for any little break, I would sit in the black room still shocked and terrified by the monster. Not one of the monitors showed it at 12 a.m. I stayed in the black room, persuading myself that I had everything to counter its attacks, since I did not forget anything outside of the room and was no more interested in seeing that awful monster. It startled me through the radio at 12:17 a.m., using the voice of a child to sing that terrible song the voice taught my children. Little son in the tiny black room, come forward and have fun. I shall eat the moon and you as well. It continued while my startled self stared at the radio kept on the small desk before the monitors. You might not find this alarming, but Sun and Moon are nicknames for my wife, and I have held for years since we married. I plugged my earplugs and just watched the radio's flickering screen when I knew I had heard enough. Something else then caught my eye on the displays, particularly the one connected to the camera at the building's entrance. Standing before the sliding doors, the man sporting the black motorcycle helmet peered inside. I asked him what he was looking for, particularly on whether he was noticing anything unusual. From what I have thus far, though, even that person may be the thing itself, or at least one of its manifestations, depending on what midnight represents. Uninterested in the cameras, the man strolled about the premises and left about 12:40 a.m. The thing had continued playing the song when I was removing the earbuds at 12:59 a.m., then it stopped suddenly at 1:02 a.m., allowing me to begin my shift. The creature did the exact same thing the following day. She skipped the hallways and only sang via the radio. From what I know, at that time I questioned how this was being managed to reach my children, people that never even walked even a toe into this facility or any other site connected to this organization. I plugged in my ears and became annoyed with the tune as yesterday. This time, though, there was nothing unusual or manial to grab my interest outside. I looked about, preparing to put the gas mask on, but then I realized the creature might grow enraged and start another smoke attack, and dread struck. Benevolent beyond the return air vent grid near the ceiling, I saw a solitary yellow eye shining, its luminosity enhanced by the black room color. Unable to stop myself, I leaped off the chair and screamed. Then many others followed. Knowing that I could not even get out of the room to leave, my terror sent me to a corner of the room and curled me in a useless attempt to defend myself. Closing my eyes and expecting to be merely dreaming, I then heard a thump, followed by the sound of something falling on the floor. Looking at the object, I discovered it was the first screw off-grid. Then the thing continued to use its telekinetic abilities, removing one after the other until the grid dropped on the floor. All I could see around the yellow eye was complete black. Except for its own head, still covered in darkness somehow, it gleamed brightly, lighting the room like a lighthouse. Once more, that icy sensation of total uneasiness crept into my body, since I felt that the object staring at me did not belong in this world. It merely stared, as it still couldn't enter the room, I suppose. Like a terrified small child, I watched the monster to the best of my ability, alternately concealing my eyes and peering through my fingers till it vanished at 01:00 a.m. Screaming like a crazy man, I hurried out of the black room on the edge of losing it till I left the building to catch some air. Before I become nuts, what more can I absorb of all this? Not even did I see him till he started his engine. Following me from the other side of the road on his motorbike, I looked up and noticed the man sporting a black motorcycle helmet getting ready to accelerate. Since I already have so on my plate, really, what does he want from me? Furious and empty, I went back home the next morning to find my kids waiting for me directly behind our house's front door. Already looking forward the worse, I asked them what was that about instead of smiling or greeting them. Though they informed me the thing was still waiting for me outside of the black room, shockingly calling that monster by name, the worse I feared, but the worst I got. The heavens has darkened. My wonderful children, my kids, they now pay no attention to anything. For them, all that counts is the black chamber, that is, my leaving the black room. Like some friggin' possessed twins or anything, they sleepwalk, they skip class, they no longer play, they no longer fear any threat or punishment, and my wife occasionally catches them staring at me when I sleep. Their evenings are simultaneous conversations about it. I had to go over all with her. Not enough. My wife does not believe in those sort of things. Except on her, it should rather be some kind of chemical working on my mind and the children's. She may have a different or stronger organism. She is essentially not in any supernatural stuff. Hence, she can and prefers to process things of this nature. She intends to provide a psychologist her request for assistance. Unlike some others, my boss never blamed me for violating any policies. This is most likely the outcome of his past breaking them personally, which left him with the scar. Rather, he requested me to meet him at work last Wednesday and displayed a great degree of empathy and compassion, scratching his head to identify answers to issues never experienced by the company. Once more, I grabbed the chance to probe the entity and the Black Room, but once more I ran into a wall since my supervisor would not answer further, acting as though she had no view of the whole picture. Knowing that I do not trust him, he persisted in reassuring me on that since he reads my posts and promised me that he would provide some helpful advice regarding the employment with me, exactly as in prior years. When I found that my day shift colleague had quit the job without any notice, darker clouds started to collect. Not thinking there was any cause, I tried to fool my way into the dark room, as it is also the control room for every camera meant to search for any noteworthy video. I was then handed another restriction, understanding that even I could not be in the Black Room during business hours. I recall that I was just allowed to sit in the open space area, beginning from 7:30 a.m., even though I remained the entire day at the company following my mishap. Except for the fact that he merely rushed outside and never returned, I gathered information from numerous employees who did not know exactly what happened with my day shift counterpart, since looking for answers was not against any rule. On the same time, I learned a few additional details regarding the several confusing policies other staff members have to abide by at this company. Everyone but me follows the rule of not being around by 6:30 p.m. Some others refuse to use designated bathrooms at designated times. One even has to arrive almost 30 minutes late every day. When my shift started on Thursday, my first personal goal was to at last view the camera footage. Nothing about the past days changed or disappeared, either by carelessness or total apathy, which let me focus on greater horror. The day my colleague quit, I watched him returning to the building's entrance and passing the locked black chamber when something within drew his attention. I watched him chatting to someone inside the room, someone who appeared imprisoned trying to open the door. My colleague tried to assist, but the door locked. Then I noticed him nodding, as though he was getting directions from the person inside before running to the supervisor's office and subsequently returned to the Black Room with the keys. He then opened the door, remained there for a few seconds, looked inside, apparently startled of not seeing anyone, before he rapidly closed and locked it back. The last time he has ever been seen at the institution, he stepped backwards in panic, then started running. On the camera, minutes later, I watched my supervisor approach at the door, and one of the staff members seemed to have informed him about my colleague rushing outside. Seeing the keys remained on the door, the supervisor screamed in rage, running to his office, then to the Black Room. He pursued the folks trailing away, then appeared to be talking to himself in front of the door. He then unlocked it, blindfolded himself with a black cloth or something he retrieved from his pocket, then walked into the dark chamber. About 2:26 p.m. I was thinking what sort of eerie circus this company ran. Nothing happened at midnight for the first time in the employment. Not even a ghostly song, no distortion, no apparition, no menacing. Though I'm not sure what event caused the day off, I just appreciated the peace and rested for 50 minutes till it was 1 a.m. I couldn't find my gloves, hence the next day there was almost war at home. I was convinced the children were responsible. Even after looking for what felt like decades, my wife and I couldn't find even one of them. I had to report to work without them, and particularly I no longer have a complete outfit or armor. You understand this if you have been reading closely from the start. Once more, load shedding was set for midnight. I spent the opening minutes of the terrible hour looking about the pitch-black chamber. The radio and the phone soon emitted static, attesting to the existence of the thing. It was most likely there behind the door, silent and still, like a horrible creep. It did not say anything out loud or through the devices. It was not in the vent like that time. I attempted to relax, toying with one of my expensive torches and immersing myself in my thoughts, but still getting ready for yet another horrible encounter. Why, since the initial postings, do I term them elegant flashlights? Some of you might be curious. Simply said, they have more lighting. Though I am not an expert in these things, if I had to characterize more just like now, well, let me state that those extra bulbs emit different sorts of lights. Neon, fluorescent, black light, UV, or whatever they can be termed. I was first experimenting by turning it on and off in the standard and usual modes. But at 12:51 a.m., I decided to try the other light settings, sometimes turning the room into a nightclub with the neon lights. But the atmosphere transformed totally when I went to what I guess is the UV mode. I observed traces on the wall I shined the light against, lines and curves oddly blazing in red, creating quite clever patterns covering the black paint. I switched from normal to neon, and the patterns vanished. I went back to UV and they all showed up once more. Emerging from 5 drawn figures, one on 3 of the walls, one on the floor, one on the ceiling, the patterns were everywhere in the space. With 2 arms and 2 legs, they resembled men, but their faces were distorted and they adopted strange and awkward posture. Their bodies seemed wrapped in ceremonial robes on top and paints. There was even a secret door next to the cabinet, and several tribal-looking masks replaced every monitor. Drawn with its head turned on its left, one of the figurines appeared to be staring at the secret door, just visible with UV light. I went up to the figure, attempting to acquire specifics on its distorted face. The figure gazed at me and twitched its iris. I gasped, sprang back, then turned the flashlight to regular mode and watched everything vanish. At that time, my heart pounding and my brow glistening with sweat, I shook with the gadget in my palms and tried the UV mode once more. In full flesh, I suppose, all the 5 figures were off the walls, ceiling, and floor, then stood on my right. I hurried to the main door, forgetting about the creature waiting for me on the other side. I only caught a glimpse of them and couldn't even hold the flashlight. I closed my eyes in agony and fear as the monster forcibly pulled the door open and sent me falling on the ground the instant I unlocked it. Through closed eyes, I could feel its brilliance and just heard all of them howling. I'm not sure whether they screamed at me or at one other. Of course, it hardly lasted a few seconds before they vanished, just at the moment the electricity returned on. I opened my eyes and stared at the flashlight, still on UV mode, but in the light of the lit corridor and the bright light bulb on the ceiling, no hidden object was shown. Still on the floor, the thunder outside then surprised me as a storm tore on the metropolis. I was game. At last, I was ready to run and not turn around like my colleague. In or out of the black room, I find no safety or sanity for me. I am going to be leaving this employment. My supervisor and the business? They best play their cards correctly. I might formally expose them with names and locations. They come for me for all I care. You know, something tells me leaving will not be that simple. I will keep you informed on all that will transpires. We won't be hearing about the Black Room not once more here. Stay safe till Wednesday next time. There is craziness on this planet. My wife woke me up in perfect terror on Monday and yelled about something happening to the kids. When we hurried to their bedroom, we discovered they were laying straight in their beds and quite pale, like bodies on autopsy tables. While I was yelling their names, trying to wake my children, My wife paused at the door, whispering that something was not right. She claimed then that she shook them exactly as I was doing before she came to wake me up, but she couldn't understand how they were back lying totally straight. I immediately instructed her to find an ambulance. Fortunately, the doctor says they are both far from dead, but as I am writing this story, their situation is still unclear and they remain unconscious, caught in some kind of coma. Since I always arrived at work on time and 6:30 p.m. was fast approaching for him, my supervisor called me about 6 o'clock p.m., worrying about me not yet showing up at work. Though he will read it here later, I decided against telling him what had happened to my children. I did not want to apply for some kind of emergency leave using the state of my children. I said it plain and honest since I was done with that job. "This is not happening, my friend." He answered with composure, "Look, this is definitely not the traditional approach to leave a job. Most of the time in this nation, companies simply let people go as they always feel strong and secure enough to replace personnel even on the same day. 30 minutes or so would not be sufficient to replace me before the next shift, but my supervisor seemed to make it quite apparent that the corporation will not let me go. I couldn't be let to resign. My wife once more came to get me as something was happening to the children, even as the chat gradually turned into an argument. I hung up and hurried for their room. "Return your attention to your obligation, Cole. The black room only waiting is yours." Still lying straight, they carried on repeating, passing that terrible message automatically and simultaneously. Turning to my wife and me, the nurses asked us what was happening and what they were talking about, just using their facial expressions. They stopped just before the doctor showed up. Fear and anxiety drove my wife from the room in tears, on almost losing her sanity. My boss continued to call and harass me on the phone in meantime. I picked up to stop it and we had a minor argument more. He said at last that should I not pick back up the work, I should expect a visit from the enforcer before hanging up on me. I had to be beside my wife. Early on Tuesday morning, while we were still in the hospital, I told my wife at last that I would not be going back to that job. She revealed a little bit about some unusual things she has been experiencing on her own, and that she tried to ignore or repress for her sanity, surprisingly not reacting at all. She told me that occasionally she would take care of the washing, and for the occasion she would include all the pieces that make up my uniform during the days I am off duty. Those things, albeit not smoking, would come out of the washing machine blazingly hot. She noticed something on the t-shirt one time as she was going to take the things off the washing line. In terms of trajectory, the sun was behind it. She could see clear patterns on the cloth, which begged her to question what kind of fancy fabric was chosen for merely a t-shirt. I left her there and hurried home to verify what she observed while attempting, fruitfully, to reach my day shift colleague on the phone. Since last Saturday, I had been attempting to reach him. When I got home, I got the last bits of the costume and utilized the solitary nice flashlight I had for home and personal usage. At first, not even in UV mode, nothing was apparent, but when I positioned the UV light behind the clothing, I saw and identified the clever black room patterns. I followed the same approach with everything from that company, including the contract, and observed the trends even throughout the paper. After telling my wife about my upcoming activities the next day, I arrived at the firm wearing a uniform in a conveniently black rubbish bag without any previous phone contact to my boss. I was met with horror right at the door when I saw the motorbike man standing there wearing the red outfit in lieu of my day shift colleague. He refused to let me in, acting on directions from the supervisor, who immediately stepped out to meet me there. Doing my best by avoiding buzzwords in front of that stalker person, I mentioned to my supervisor that I was not returning to work just like my prior day shift counterpart because of reasons he undoubtedly knew of. He objected once more, reminding me of the conditions of the contract, which I suspect he also knew to be content-shifting. Looking like the motorcycle guy, grinning with contentment, I put the rubbish bag with the uniform in front of his feet and bolted, resolved to leave that dark side of my life behind. That day, emotions and anxiety overpowered me, which prevented me from functioning, as well as helps to explain why I couldn't write, edit, and post an update at that time. I'm sorry once more. After growing weary of constantly calling my colleague to no result, on Thursday I typed his name on browsers and social media applications and obtained one of his accounts. On the social media app, I examined his contacts and posts and found his wife. She took no time to accept, going as far as phoning me first. I wasted no time sending a request. As it happened, both of us were searching for my colleague, a fact that devastated me exactly as she described. That one night at 12 a.m. the police arrived to seek for him. He accompanied them, but never returned since. Not even the law enforcement acknowledged having a hand in his disappearance, since no record indicated any officer being sent to his house. Unable to sleep over the entire event, my wife and I were smoking in the living room in the next day at about 6 a.m. We actually stayed there all night. The children's situation had gotten worse, since several of their small and delicate bodies had developed gangrene, gradually bringing them into death. She said no when I suggested her to go to the bedroom and relax, so motivating me to head alone. Opening the door, I gasped at what I found there. She got up to have a look, gasping also at what she saw. Back was the rubbish bag holding the uniform. My wife slammed the door, hyperventilated in terror, and turned to face me, facing a dream that was suddenly consuming her more than mine. She knew I returned the uniform. I told her everything, and that day she even apologized about first not believing me. Still, that was obviously an indication of infiltration, and it had to be addressed. In shock, I opened the door and discovered the uniform out of the bag, then standing on its own in front of us as if worn by an invisible entity before it rushed towards us. Without bothering to use the doorknob, I slammed the door closed and whatever was on the other side hammered on it mercilessly. My wife lost it, screamed at it to just leave us alone while I answered a phone from the supervisor, and it seemed to stop the supernatural incident just there. Though you could know exactly what he wanted to say, precisely his message can be expressed as this: all that will not stop. Before the enforcer visits your wife, children, and yourself, get back to work for their benefit. One day these updates might stop early on purpose. Given things is truly spiraling out of hand, I should definitely go back to work temporarily. Many of you, as actual human beings with really nice hearts, have disregarded my errors and offered a lot of ideas since the original post. I have visited some of them. This time, things is more worse. Once more, after telling the community my story, I ask you to propose anything that might rescue my family and myself out of this fatal trap. Tell me, please. I returned to my employment. I went back to that location. My wife is still in pain, my children are still in the hospital, and just the knowledge that I am connected to that company makes me gangrened. Not one single penalty against me, even after I dropped my stance for 1 good week. You know, they seem to be aware that the work itself is already a fitting retribution. Undoubtedly, I will undoubtedly get the money once more. Yeah, it will be helpful. But the things I observed this week really show. No matter the tone used, I would want to appreciate all those who took the time to provide thoughts and advice for me to leave this situation before I start this post. I also thank all those who could not offer any guidance. At least I wished my family and me well. Many thanks very much, all of you. Monday once more, but in a different attitude than last Monday. I had to wear the uniform. The gloves are still missing, although naturally this is not yet of great significance. With what it presented last time specifically, I have no idea what that uniform is. Is it living? Is it also an entity all by itself, exactly like the numbers on the dark room's walls? Feeling as though I was wearing death, I trembled to the core in the black clothing. Though I had on the uniform, my wife insisted on staying at the hospital, where she also knew load shedding is not allowed, rather than alone at home. When I arrived to the facility, I discovered that the only person who freely displays wrath over my return to work is the motorcycle guy, or new colleague, Dylan, for the sake of the narrative. Fed up with his lies, I challenged him with the causes of his hate. Unfortunately, everything he said was trash. I cannot include in this piece, only to avoid it being deleted by you-know-who. He promised me to manufacture my dismissal all by itself before I left. I held back from calling him my guest. I visited the black room most of the evening, gathering the bravery to use my flashlight in UV mode to see what can go wrong, but I missed the chance before 10 p.m. After turning off the lights, I then tried the UV mode outside of the black room and was perplexed by a spectacle that stunned but simultaneously did not surprise me. The patterns were there. I could not determine if they issued from the black room or if they instead gathered towards it. When I pointed the light towards myself, even the clear designs on my uniform were then gleaming in crimson. Everywhere in the business, in the kitchen, in the bathrooms, at the door, those patterns were evident. Though there were more of those little black invisible doorways, there was not even one sketched figure like those in the black room. Behind one of them, I could hear voices, like several people gently debating something significant, almost like a professional conference. But I lacked the confidence to open that door. Rather, I returned to the dark room and, at 11:34 p.m., plucked the bravery to employ the UV mode there. Though the individuals were absent and the monitors turned away to tribal masks, I could see the patterns and the small black entrance. I turned on the UV mode and watched till midnight. Someone behind the invisible little door spoke as soon as it was 12:30 a.m. I simply blinked, and the figures emerged on the floor, ceiling, and wall while the monitors changed to the tribal masks. Frozen anticipating them to move like previous time, they did not. Like a tape, the voice behind the little door next to the cabinet repeated the same phrases again and over, approaching which I could only grasp the first word, identify. Was it a tool, machine, or... When the thing started pounding on the black chamber main entrance, I nearly passed out from heart attack. Deactivating the UV mode, the monster began to laugh wildly, while continued hammering on the main door, promising my family and myself death never seen before. It stayed there, and I also kept still listening to everything till 01:00 a.m. I visited the library the following day, searching for anything that might be of use. Except for my uniform, my contract, and the organization name, I have no picture, no video, no other documentation. I attempted asking the librarian I spoke with about any materials regarding the creature, as I didn't know how I could explain the circumstances without being called a crazy person. She looked at me as if I offended her and urged me to leave the minute I spoke its name. I tried to calm things, but she shrieked for security, and I went outside right away. Fortunately, later on when I got to the facility, I did not see my day shift counterpart. Soon I was totally alone in the building once more and was able to ask some really fascinating questions. Who watches the building at night when I have Wednesday and the weekend off? Who did I miss working in the prior week? Sadly, I discovered that the pertinent footages were absent when trying to find responses to those queries using the matching camera recordings. I thus proceeded according to normal till I came upon one of the worst circumstances thus far. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard 4 strong bangs emanating from the storage area at 11:41 p.m. Sure that the eerie show wasn't yet scheduled, I made sure to do my work right and plucked the bravery to look into the sounds. When I went to the storage room carrying just the radio, I found nothing or nobody unusual. Then I heard 2 big bangs from the door and went to check, but found nothing until a man appeared behind the circular reception counter. Under his terrible clown mask, his identity was hidden. The invader soon showed his machete before jumping over the desk to pursue. Driven by the invader, I ran for the black chamber and emerged victorious, sealing the door before he could catch up. Just a few seconds later, he banged on the door and rushed back to the storage room. I noticed the static noise right away when I went to use the radio to alert the authorities. At midnight, the thing initially set itself in motion, starting its reign of terror straight in front of the black room door instead of the reception area. Ignorant of the threat approaching, the invader was occupied breaking open many storage unit doors with his firearm. Many individuals cannot help themselves. They grab any chance to blame me for rule breaking. But if it means something great, like saving the life of a fellow human being, I will never regret doing something wrong like breaking a rule. Against the no communication rule, I told him to run away for his life using the black room microphone. At first, he dismissed me lightly until he heard from the creature causing him to escape. From the monitors and the distortions, I could see the entity do things I never had seen it do before, like disappearing and then resurfacing at apparently random locations. As I couldn't identify some areas of the building, it left fresh images on the monitors in its tracks. Then the screen showing the entrance, for instance, was showing a wall. Then I heard the thing using building speakers and my voice to guide the invader back to the black room. While the invader was sprinting toward a certain doom, I tried to resist its technique to no effect and observed the thing motionless behind the black room door. Turning, the man noticed the thing exactly there. He dropped his machete, then started tiny steps backwards, removing his mask. Though I could not identify him, I watched his face covered in panic. Then he raised his hand as if he were pointing at the monster and yelled as I had never heard a man scream before. He collapsed on the floor, convulsing. The thing did not move 1 inch, but the monitor showing the black room door remained distorted. At some time, the invader stopped moving. The creature stayed at the door, immobile and silent, until it softly murmured at 12:59 a.m. "You are next." I left the black room at 01:01 a.m. and walked toward the invader. Having overdosed on a pure and simple concentration of a basic human feeling, dread, he was dead, tears in his eyes and foam in his mouth. About refusing to look at that thing, I was right. After what happened at the library, I believe I was right about not stating its name in this piece or anywhere else. Not startled about the deceased man laying on the floor, my boss suddenly arrived 5 minutes later and even asked me to assist him with body loading into his car. I turned away from helping him. He merely shook his head and laughed, then hauled the body away to my complete incredulity. He returned then, instructing me to keep working, warning me not to act foolish till we have another meeting not too far off. Lunacy. Total lunacy. Later on, he called me to congratulate me for hard work and informed me that the corporation was so delighted the higher-ups had another surprise gift for me, only accessible when I returned to work on Thursday. But I believe I previously got a surprise gift directly via a message. Many messages have folks requesting me to let them share this run of posts on their networks. Good individuals, I am not discounting you. Rather, keep in mind that right now my family and I are dealing with major and perhaps fatal events. First, just permit this series and all this craziness to pass. Then we will talk about permission. Right now, our life are quite threatened. The one direct message regarding a man called Connor who wants to meet and assist my family and me surprises me. Having gone through a similar circumstance, he advises me not to approach any police car at midnight, particularly if the officer inside is alone. It might serve as the enforcer. When I arrived to the office last Thursday, my supervisor and a couple other higher-ups I have never met before praised me right away. Dylan, on the other hand, was seething in anger and bitterness. For what? Brand new automobile. After my last and terrible shift, the corporation decided to present me with a surprise gift among the most opulent SUVs available. I didn't want it. And after all, I just seen someone die lately and thrown away like garbage. I couldn't smile. Resolved to keep on with the facade, they all ignored my gestures and body language. Midnight and the rest, I stayed in the black room, broken and wailing, shaking and coughing blood during the shift. I simply went in the morning without taking the black SUV with me and ignored everything or anyone. I straight went to see my wife and children at the hospital. Friday was my interesting conversation with Connor, still on his way to the city I reside in. The chat did not proceed exactly like that, but I have only included the most relevant bits as this post is not too long. When will we meet? I inquired. Soon, he responded. Who are you anymore? For what reason should I believe you? I asked. I am the one looking to volunteer, at least that closest one. I know what exactly is happening and what to do, and you never do. I know what I went through back in 2013 and subsequently. I have been connected to that company, visited that town, and experienced it. You worked there? I asked. Not directly, and whatever that surprise present is, don't accept it, he said. Why? Asked, just interested in his response, I asked. Your collapse will be here. As they say, join them if you cannot surpass them. I just see two possibilities for you unless I assist you and we try something. You find yourself the next supervisor, the grave. The worst of them is the later. Connor shot back. You therefore know what all those things are. Why do I? Why my family? What is there desired? I sought. Why do you? Man, you applied there for a job. With you, what do you suppose a company want? All for their own advantage. They want to extract the juice from you to the last drop. They don't give a damn about your life, your freedom, your family, your children. You are not a human to them. You are a selected productivity unit, that is, a cow for a ritual, where the entity is the farmer and the corporation owns the farm, or is the farm. With the governance of our nation, things like WFH against RTO, and much more importantly, this goes deeper than us. He divulged. The conversation lasted, and finally, he emailed me a link to his own post. I would not believe his horrific incident with the enforcer if I hadn't gone through my own experiences with the entities. But his first recommendation is something that would readily lead me to believe he aimed at killing me. Connor told me to follow all institution policies except the one meant to prevent viewing the entity. Connor wanted me to talk to it mostly. I later on began the shift as normal, but stayed constantly in the black room. When my supervisor phoned me while I was on shift, I chose to ignore him since I would rather consider my life and all the incidents. That clown mask guy was someone. Was he really only a burglar? For what will my children be living? Should I connect with this entity directly? What would happen? The creature arrived at the door at midnight and informed me it was getting ready with surprise for the moon. Something it constantly urged me to do. I battled hard inside, trying to muster the confidence to confront it directly, but I turned away. Then, presumably annoyed by my silence, the creature engaged in behavior I never would have considered. It opened the black room with one exact, strong blow. Just as the door rushed in my way, I almost caught a glimpse of it, a yellow and pleasant glow. I twisted around and curled, got hit by the door but stayed on ground. Then I opened my eyes toward the wall and saw my shadow reflected back, encircled by the one of the monster whose numerous limbs stretched all around the doorframe as it still could not enter the room. We both could hear my heart pounding and my labored breathing. Every time I moved by even an inch, the entity moved too around the doorframe with odd motions I cannot yet find words to explain, as I could not even clearly see its form. I could not communicate to it. I truly felt it would be strong enough to at last bring me inside the black room. "I will eat on your heart when the moment comes." It spoke softly, then its shadow vanished a few seconds later, leaving just mine against the wall. The voice of a gentle woman. It was 01:00 a.m., as you most likely anticipated, but I stayed paralyzed for at least 30 minutes. I could not even talk to it. Later that morning, I told Connor the truth about that. A human cannot just face that thing. Knowing my anxiety, he told me he had arrived in the city. He instructed me to straightforwardly visit the hospital where he was already waiting for me. Almost right away, we went to the children's room and woke up my wife. Connor brought out his own sophisticated flashlight from his backpack and used the UV mode right on the kids after sealing the doors and windows, turning off the lights and plunging us into the dark. They started convulsing while gradually vomiting something black when something brilliant showed itself inside their chests. I had to hold my wife and stop her from screaming at him and the terrible spectacle on his orders until the black items were totally out of their lips. The missing gloves were these ones. My children woke up practically immediately, apparently healed right away. Following what the thing had shown me on Friday, my wife and I considered the thought of simply running away from all that, even if we had to start over somewhere else. We had already started getting ready for our weekend escape. I thus did not post anything here, and on Monday and Tuesday I skipped work. Connor reminded me that it did not actually work for him and opposed the proposal. He barely mentioned it in his message, but like I have to do, especially if I wish to halt my own health issue, he had to fight back for his family and himself. One has to tackle a problem, not overlook or give up on. I had to go back there to formally stop being their slave, not to keep on as one. My supervisor left many notes apologizing for the more and more hostile behavior of the entity, imploring me to get back to work and suggesting me to meet the management board on Friday. That man I could not grasp anymore. He is evolving into a mystery, just as the thing is. Not one thing in this company makes logic. Danger, though, was something I could readily grasp. I witnessed a silent police car with lights off, traveling up and down the alley just today at midnight by the window, as if the officer, or should I say the enforcer, waited for the ideal opportunity to strike. Something took over my thoughts. It was something I hadn't seen them do in a while. There were sincere smiles on the faces of my wife and children. As we traveled to a new city and a new life, the air invited itself inside the train. I personally wouldn't have thought that things might turn out so well a few days ago, so let me give you an update on what happened in this final section of my narrative. We stayed inside our home while I awaited the arrival of Friday, October 27th. As we worked out a strategy for how I had to attend the meeting, Connor stayed in contact with me. When the day finally came, Connor gave me the tools and advice I needed to finally put an end to the horror while driving me to work. Dylan was in an odd and peculiar mood when I got to work, and he was wearing black instead of red like me. He was not as hostile toward me as he had been previously. Rather, he appeared to be making a concerted effort to be kind while wearing a worried expression. Without even addressing my absences, my supervisor adopted an incredibly amiable demeanor that was in stark contrast to the purpose for which he called the meeting. The meeting was held in an overlapped boardroom at midnight, which caught me off guard the most. What did overlapping mean to him? I pondered, being aware that it would be the subject of our conversation with Connor before midnight. My boss then departed without giving me any further information, presumably anticipating that I would work. But I had other plans that would be jeopardized by significant challenges. Dylan was one of them. He didn't leave even until 6:30 p.m., so for whatever reason. He said that the corporation had imprisoned him and that he was unable to leave when I questioned him about why he was still there. He struggled to communicate because he was tense, shaking, and on the verge of tears. I pressed him to explain, of course, and he admitted that he was the one who had sent the man with the machete and the clown mask a few days prior. He intended to set up a situation that would expose my incapacity in order to get me dismissed and put him in the public eye. When the company learned, they decided to take advantage of him rather than turn him over to the police. Dylan made an effort to leave his stamp on the business, and he was frightened after somehow succeeding. He had been requested to wait there for no apparent reason, and he had no choice but to comply. He kept asking me questions throughout the evening, and I was able to describe the scenario to him, which increased his awareness but also his fear. He said that although the procedure had already begun, it was not yet the case when I questioned if they had forced him to sign anything new. Something took over my thoughts. It was something I hadn't seen them do in a while. There were sincere smiles on the faces of my wife and children. As we traveled to a new city and a new life, the air invited itself inside the train. I personally wouldn't have thought that things might turn out so well a few days ago, so let me give you an update on what happened in this final section of my narrative. We stayed inside our home while I awaited the arrival of Friday, October 27th. As we worked out a strategy for how I had to attend the meeting, Connor stayed in contact with me. When the day finally came, Connor gave me the tools and advice I needed to finally put an end to the horror while driving me to work. Dylan was in an odd and peculiar mood when I got to work, and he was wearing black instead of red like me. He was not as hostile toward me as he had been previously. Rather, he appeared to be making a concerted effort to be kind while wearing a worried expression. Without even addressing my absences, my supervisor adopted an incredibly amiable demeanor that was in stark contrast to the purpose for which he called the meeting. The meeting was held in an overlapped boardroom at midnight, which caught me off guard the most. What did overlapping mean to him? I pondered, being aware that it would be the subject of our conversation with Connor before midnight. My boss then departed without giving me any further information, presumably anticipating that I would work, but I had other plans that would be jeopardized by significant challenges. Dylan was one of them. He didn't leave even until 6:30 p.m. for whatever reason. He said that the corporation had imprisoned him and that he was unable to leave when I questioned him about why he was still there. He struggled to communicate because he was tense, shaking, and on the verge of tears. I pressed him to explain, of course, and he admitted that he was the one who had sent the man with the machete and the clown mask a few days prior. He intended to set up a situation that would expose my incapacity in order to get me dismissed and put him in the public eye. When the company learned, they decided to take advantage of him rather than turn him over to the police. Dylan made an effort to leave his stamp on the business, and he was frightened after somehow succeeding. He had been requested to wait there for no apparent reason, and he had no choice but to comply. He kept asking me questions throughout the evening, and I was able to describe the scenario to him, which increased his awareness but also his fear. He said that although the procedure had already begun, it was not yet the case when I questioned if they had forced him to sign anything new. We didn't patrol or engage in any work-related activities. I was occupied with texting Connor about the plan, while Dylan merely stared at the floor, periodically interrupting the stillness with inquiries. As he grew increasingly anxious, we simply waited in the dark room. Dylan apologized for upsetting me just before midnight, but I dismissed it and insisted that he instead apologize to the family of the guy he had harmed and managed to kill. He sympathized with me for breaking the regulations and reassured me that the company must be aware of it. He claims that he is aware of no rule in existence that has not been breached at least once, for whatever reason, even by those who are meant to be upholding it. Human nature is what it is. Then, at last, midnight came. I mustered all my strength and turned off the room's lights, causing my own load shedding and leaving the entire building in complete darkness. I left Dylan by himself in the dark room and departed with a backpack, prepared to carry out the plan. As I walked toward the boardroom, my heart pounding, I was terrified of running into the creature. I pondered something Connor had mentioned before, getting a better idea of what overlapping meant, but my thoughts were cut off as I noticed yellow lights coming. I flung the backpack a few meters away from me after hastily taking a piece of cloth out of my pocket and blindfolding myself. In that regard, Connor had better be correct. The sounds the thing produced on the floor gave me the impression that a group of people were rolling or walking on the ground as I heard it approach. Before it startled me with a question, I heard it wander around a little bit more and examine the bag for a few seconds. "Identify your soul." The voice was that of a child asking. As Connor indicated, the time had come for me to put everything he had taught me into practice. That thing won't be able to recognize you if you don't have anything from them on you and you don't use your eyes. Pilgrim. Connor instructed me to react, but I had no idea what I was saying. Function. A woman's voice said it. Unknown. When I responded, there was a prolonged period of stillness. The silence of the entity sent a chill through me that I could not abide. I believed it was going to tear my head off my neck. House? As I felt its lamps approaching my face and heard the mechanical noises they created all around me, it questioned in an elderly man's voice. Concealed. Connor said. I spoke, plunging the entity in confusion. Consequently, the thing was quiet for a few seconds. After hearing it go on, I waited for a few minutes before taking off the blindfold. After that, I grabbed the backpack and continued with the plan, arriving to the boardroom at approximately 12:27 a.m. I took a high-end flashlight out of the package, put it in UV mode, and aimed it at the white door, which instantly went dark as the red patterns began to slowly show. 4 seated individuals in black robes were waiting for me inside when I opened the door. The supervisor was one of them. "Hello, Cole, please take a seat." My boss spoke icily, motionless, and staring directly at him as though under hypnosis. "Let's not waste further time." Someone else said something. "I never intended to." I said that I didn't want to sit with those folks. "First of all, Cole, you won't benefit from anything Connor has to say. You are already very much a part of the project." One of the managers said. "You mean involved in the ritual?" I shot back. "Will you please switch off that thing?" With reference to the flashlight, my boss inquired. "Sure, but before, let me do one thing," I said, prepared to end the suffering. I took the contract and my uniform t-shirt out of the package. It dawned on them then that the genuine uniform was in the bag and that I was wearing a phony one that was identical. They all got to their feet. I quickly ripped the contract in two, and I was shocked to see the blood spilling from the page. I ignored the management board's cries and did the same with the t-shirt. We soon heard a rumbling sound as something, drawn by what had just happened, charged towards the boardroom. I put on my blindfold once more. "It's approaching. We must move quickly," the supervisor yelled. I could only hear the mayhem that began when the thing exploded in. The room was filled with screams of pain and misery that were getting louder by the second, bones crackling and flesh shredding. Oddly, each of them used a different human name to plead with the thing to cease. I was prepared to abandon the management board members to their fate when I used my hands to search and locate the door I had entered via. But before I did so, please don't go just yet. The thing said something. I froze, but said nothing. Thank you for helping me. I simply nodded in return, but it added, How may I help you? Anything you desire, I'll do. It inquired, I want you to return to where you came from. I responded, following Connor's directions once more. It was the pleasant aspect of the entity that he warned me about. This was an entity beyond human comprehension that, despite its occasional ability to mimic or feign such traits, had no empathy, pity, or love for humans at all. Therefore, it made sense for no person to feel that way about it. I shall do it for you. Perhaps oblivious to the fact that I had reversed its trick, it said that I should banish it far from this world. I gave another nod, went outside, and shut the door after myself. After taking off the blindfold, I moved boldly and slowly down the dark hallways and toward the black room. When I arrived, the door was open, which struck me as really odd, so I went to have a closer look. I found Dylan dead on the ground, just as his clown-masked co-conspirator had died a few days prior. I informed him that the creature may be very clever and cunning, but he might have missed that part. I just waited in the room till 1:00 a.m. with the door open without making any calls, and then I left the building without a problem. After waiting patiently outside for me, Connor drove me home with a breath of relief. I asked him how he learned about the entity and the company while we were traveling, but he informed me that his complete narrative was for another time. As he stated, the most crucial thing is that I am now free and shouldn't reveal the company. In any case, they must report on the recent disappearances of their employees. Scandals are not what they desire. Out of all the questions that raced through my head, I was unable to remember the one that most surprised me. Why did Connor, a total stranger, go out of his way to assist me? Of all individuals, I am the foolish and idiotic rule breaker who deserves to die, because in any case, he brought about his own dreadful fate. Connor was taken aback by my choice to assist the man in the clown mask in such a harsh and heartless society that lacks empathy for anyone, including other humans. He acknowledged that he would not have done the same. Therefore, that fact alone demonstrated to him that I had a unique heart. As a result, people like me give him hope that humanity still exists. After our talk in the car, I've made the decision to take Connor's lead and launch my own project. Something that I enjoy doing, that brings me joy, and that doesn't need me to hide anything or report anything to anyone. My family and I are traveling for this reason. Connor had offered to assist me once again with anything he could, despite the fact that he had already done too much for my family and me. I want to thank everyone for sharing that terrible trip with me and ask that you all take care of yourself.